Welcome to Souhan Unfiltered at SOUHAN-UNFILTERED.com. Tonight we are live at O'Gara's Irish Pub off Snelling and 94. Very easy to find, halfway between the Twin Cities. Come on by. Chris and Danny are old friends of mine. Come by, have a beer, have some of their good old Irish stew, whatever you like. Tonight's guest, Tom Pelissero, with me. This is the Alive and Social Network. The network's really rolling now. We have new studios in South Minneapolis. We're going to start doing some music in the living room sessions, because we actually have a living room in this house we're renting.
Very nice.
Studio's upstairs. We're going to have some music. And, I'm having so much fun with this format. First of all, I don't work for assholes or with an asshole. That's awesome.
Plus, you can say asshole.
Plus, I can say asshole.
It's a pretty big change.
It's awesome.
It's a different environment than we used to do the Sunday morning show.
It really is.
I can order a beer live
yes,
on
you
the air.
can.
I am 10 feet from the bar.
I think we probably should go back in time and order beers while doing the Sunday show
Might have
and
been
see
a
what
few
happens.
better. Yeah, I'd
see
say
what
so.
happens at that point. If you don't know who Tom Pelissero is, what the hell's wrong with you? But I'll go ahead and explain anyway. Tom is a longtime football writer, now writing about the NFL for USA Today. Worked his way up through the ranks, local media, worked for KFAN, worked for 1500 ESPN, still does some stuff for 1500 ESPN. What am I missing? Anything? Any stops
Was
along
in
the
Green
way?
Bay for a while.
That's right. You were in Green Bay
covering
for
the
a while.
Packers.
Yep. And many other things.
Mm-hmm.
You did some good stuff even on minor league hockey, I remember.
Good memory. That's impressive.
Yeah. We're going to get to some of your personal background and some of your personal views on football and everything else, but let's start with not the Patriots Deflategate, or as I prefer to call it, Deflategate. Let's start with what you have gotten as far as reaction to this crazy story.
Well, first of all, when things come out about the Patriots, you have to take them with some grain of salt because no one else does. As a journalist, you have to say to yourself, okay, you have to be patient with it because everyone immediately, they're the one team in the league. If this came out about any other team, the reaction would be, A, it's probably just sour grapes, and B, well, what difference did it really make? With the Patriots, that's why they won, and they absolutely did it. So I saw it sitting in a sushi bar in Seattle at like 10 o'clock Pacific on Sunday night because I had been out there covering the other game, the Seahawks-Packers game, which was wild. Didn't see a whole lot of the Patriots-Colts game. The tweet comes up from, I think, Bob Kravitz down in Indianapolis, had the initial report on it, and I had that same reaction, which is just, I'm going to have to play the wet blanket here because everyone's just going, oh, how can you do it, Bill? How can you do it? So in covering it then in the coming days, because it clearly and quickly becomes the biggest story. And I put out on Twitter the other day saying, where does this rank in surreal Super Bowl week subplots? So, to my surprise, there were a lot. People were like, what about the deer antler spray guy?
Oh, I forgot about deer antler
Robinson,
spray.
Barrett Robbins
That's
disappearing
right.
to Tijuana the night before the game. There have been
What a league.
a fair number of them. But this one, we're talking about 2 pounds per square inch, which if you ask the average person to quantify what that even is, they wouldn't know what to tell you. So one of the first stories I wrote on it was going through the rules and talking to some people who worked in the league and have worked on the equipment side, on the operations side, because they're the ones who know what actually happens. And so the story I wrote, so it had to be about Tuesday or Wednesday this week, was about just the order of operations and how it might sound like it's easy, just, you deflated the footballs, but there's a lot more that goes into it because 2 hours and 15 minutes before, the referee has to check the pressure in the football. Mm-hmm. Then the balls stay in the room with him. The ball attendant, which is a job, probably not a bad job, the ball attendant picks up the balls from the locker room that the teams inflate. Each team submits 12. Home team submits 12 backup balls as well. Visiting team can submit 12 backup balls for away games. So all those balls are taken into the officials' room, and they can reject them for not having the right pressure, for being too scuffed up, for not meeting the measurements, whatever it may be. But then they stay in that room. And only a couple minutes before the game does the ball attendant come back and bring them to the ball boys. So you're left with this very small time frame, a couple of minutes before kickoff, where the balls are out there being taken out to the ball boys. And if it doesn't happen then, if they're not being deflated then, it has to happen while the game's going on, where you've got dozens of network TV cameras, 68,000 people in the stadium. You've got millions of people at home watching, and me in the aftermath, I'm going through frame by frame. What's the ball boy doing there? He's got his hand under a Gatorade towel. What's going on? So I write this story. and immediately
By the way,
start
is there a grassy knoll at Foxborough Stadium?
There was a lot.
I think there is.
I was taking photos and sending them to my editor of like these blurry figures wearing the ball boy
Sasquatches,
and like who's the guy next to him? Craziness. But so I start getting tweets from people suggesting different devices that you could use to covertly deflate a football. Some of them were legitimate too, things I didn't know about. There's little 2-inch metal devices that you can set it to a particular pounds per square inch and deflate something in a matter of seconds. And theoretically, it's going to be pretty close. You've got people suggesting tire bleeders like they use in NASCAR, where you can go out and take air out of the tire. I had one guy send me a design, I think he drew it himself, of a glove with a needle coming out, like something out of Death Race 2000, where you could take the ball, put it into your needled gloved hand, and it would take the air out of the ball. Then today, I got an email from a scientist at the University of Utah, a researcher, who actually made the most compelling thing that I've heard to this point. I don't know if the story's posted yet, but I called another scientist, too, and talked to them through this. And here's his theory. And it's going to sound like the dumbest thing ever, which might make it the smartest thing ever. So everyone has talked about the pressure in the football couldn't drop that much going from in the locker room to on the field. 'Cause it's only a drop of a matter of, 20 degrees. What if you inflated them in a sauna, pumped the ball full of hot air, which then, because it would weigh correctly 2 hours, 50 minutes before, but would be cooling down to room temperature in the referee's room, by the time it got on the field, it could drop far more. And it's not the dumbest thing you've ever heard.
That's brilliant.
It actually is. Now, that's not to say that that's what they did, but if you want to do it in a way where it's not someone out there with their needle glove taking the air out of the ball, this is not the worst idea, especially because you also then have condensation that gets in the ball. That vaporizes. We'll see.
Good.
I'm going to put it out there, get lambasted by all the same people who yelled at me last time over the theories that I printed. It's not my theory. I'm not a physicist.
I love that theory. That's brilliant. Because here's the thing.
It is online, by the way, usatoday.com. You can read it right now.
So check out Tom Pelissero's piece on the smoking man's role. Are you old enough to know what the smoking man is? The reference
I'm
is
not.
X-Files.
All right.
Okay, the smoking man.
I was alive for X-Files. I never watched the show.
Oh, you should have watched it.
Not a big alien guy.
It was, but the great thing was, I will say it's worth watching. I'm not an alien guy, and it's still worth watching.
That was David Duchovny and who?
And what was her name?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, she didn't go on. The great thing about her was she wasn't your stereotypical hot female lead. She was kind of a little frumpy and a little nerdy, and that worked perfectly. I mean, the show was not aliens.
It worked perfectly on the show, and then the moment she left the show, we don't even remember her name.
It was over, yeah. Well, that was not a role she was going to follow up with anything else. Gillian Anderson, I would say.
I think that's right.
Yeah. And Duchovny was great in it. It was pretty awesome because it got into the weirdness of the mindset of people who think that everything's a conspiracy. But then in this case, there actually were conspiracies, which is kind of the double pump fake of the show. So here's the thing about the condensation and the sauna and the theory you just threw out there. If Bill Belichick was going to cheat in this way, he'd find some ingenious way to do it.
Well, and beyond that, if you read the letter of the rule, it wouldn't be illegal.
Right.
Because all it says is the pressure, nothing about the temperature. You wouldn't be able to feel it because it's got a rubber bladder inside the ball, which serves as an insulator that doesn't allow the heat to get out.
You're going
It
deep,
would be
man.
It'd be fairly genius, and technically it'd be legal. Now, as one of the scientists that I talked to this afternoon, and this is the state of the NFL season where I'm talking to scientists on Friday afternoon, the week before the Super Bowl, what he said was, is it morally okay? To the letter of the law, it's okay, but morally. And he made some point along the lines of, it's not the dumb people that you have to watch out for in this world. It's the smart people because they do things in a really shrewd way.
Right. Yeah, and that would be classic Belichick, to find a way around the rule. Now, we know he's willing to break rules in certain cases, but it would be classic Belichick. It's just like the formations he's using now. You can argue that he's going against the spirit of the rule, but he's actually staying within the letter of the law and finding a way to screw up the opposition. The whole sauna theory would be it would be Belichickian as much as anything I can think of. It'd be awesome.
Because no one else would ever think of
right.
it. And they'll have to rewrite a rule because
yeah.
of it. Again, we're not saying that's what he did.
I'm saying that's what he did.
But there's a scientist in Salt Lake City, Utah, who thinks that's what happened. May have been what happened.
You're the objective reporter, so you're just sharing the possibility. I'm the columnist and podcast host saying, damn right that's what he did. In fact, let's just write it. Let's just say that's exactly what happened.
Well, and this is, too, the other thing that, and you deal with this all the time, you write opinion. I write some opinion. I write a lot of just straight-ahead news stories, too. But people will blame you for facts.
Oh, yeah.
People will go out of their way to say the meanest possible stuff to you and call you a moron. When over the past week here, as a bunch of the Seattle Seahawks players have been fined for various things, namely things involving their own balls, and I get the notes being, you're pathetic. How can this happen? Trust me, if I were fining people, all of you would be fined out there in Twitter world, all right? I would be handing out, taking checks left and right.
Oh, man. Is there any danger? I had a baseball person come up to me. I was at the Twins luncheon. I had a baseball executive come up to me and ask a question I've been asking for a long time, but that I've almost dismissed at this point. But I'm interested in your perspective. Baseball executive says, has it gotten to the point where the NFL is just going to be the WWE and it's going to be ridiculousness from now on and it's eventually going to sap the popularity? And my answer was, well, it might continue to include elements that you would see in the WWE. You might see more ridiculousness. You might see more weird rule breaking. You might see more weird behavior. You might see more clownishness. And it ain't going to hurt the popularity.
Well, and it's so many different things combined, too. I mean, just look in the playoffs here. I mean, set aside the fact that they had to go through things involving domestic violence and alleged child abuse and serious societal issues early in the season. In the playoffs, they're dealing with, was it pass interference in Dallas?
Yep.
Did Des Bryant catch that ball? Were Tom Brady's balls properly inflated? You've gone to the opposite end in terms of the gravity of the issue, yet from the NFL's bottom line perspective, this is bigger. Why? Because it's the integrity of the game. Because as Roger Goodell has said before, it's all about people want to believe what they see. They don't want to think. That's why the NFL is extraordinarily protective against gambling interests, even though they now have embraced fantasy football. It's a fun, entertainment-only sort of a thing. Everybody knows what fantasy football is, but they're very careful about those sorts of associations. They're very careful in a lot of ways. That's why they came down hard in Bountygate. That's why they came down somewhat hard in Spygate, even though not as hard as a lot of people think they should have, especially now in light of the latest and greatest allegations, rumors, whatever, what may have you, about the New England Patriots. But as bad as the Ray Rice situation was, which rewrites the domestic violence policy, it changes a lot of things, I think, about how teams are going to have to come to terms with a Jameis Winston, who, guess what, maybe one allegation away, might be one misdemeanor charge away from being suspended a year now, not a couple of games, a year. It's going to have all these impacts. But for the average fan, for the middle-of-the-road casual fan, Ray Rice is going to turn you off. Adrian Peterson might turn you off. For the hardcore fan, not believing that the games are being played on the field and that they're fixed, or that the complications of the NFL rule book, or that a coach cheating the rules, that all those things is what's going to determine the champion, that's a bigger problem for the league.
No question about it. You said it perfectly. I've been answering questions about Pete Rose for my entire career. And why isn't Pete Rose allowed in the Hall of Fame? And how come the PED guy are on the ballot? Well, because performance-enhancing drugs in baseball are bad. And they're probably worse in baseball than any other sport because baseball fans care so much about the record book, and guys using PEDs blew up the record books. But this much you can say for the PED guys. They were trying to win the game. They were looking for an illicit edge to win the game, but at least they still wanted to win the game. The problem with Pete Rose is he violated the one overarching rule in baseball, which is do not gamble, do not be associated with gamblers, and therefore do not be under the thumb of gamblers. Never allow anyone to think that you might lose a game on purpose.
And you have to go all the way back to Paul Hornung for the last real gambling-related NFL scandal, I think.
Yeah.
Now, the reason that NFL injury reports exist, another thing that Belichick, for years, by listing everyone as questionable, has skirted in a lot of people's minds. But those came about because you had, I believe it was some sort of a connection Super Bowl week that came out where one of the players had some sort of association circa like 1967. Mm-hmm. And so they decided, okay, now you're going to have to disclose what players are really injured, what their injuries are. Again, even though people are vague about it, that's a lot of the driving force. They want everyone to believe that it's real. And that's why they now have to put together this investigation. As ridiculous as that Brady press conference was yesterday, as funny as a lot of the quotes taken out of context from that press conference may have been about how perfect his balls are, once he finds the perfect ones, doesn't want anyone rubbing them, doesn't want anyone touching them, just wants to zip them up, get them ready to play with. It is a serious issue for the NFL because they cannot get into a situation where people look back upon a championship and think it's tainted. You're also going to have this. Let's not forget this, too. And I am of the mind, at least before this came out, I thought the Patriots, this was going to be the year where they were going to win. Because I think that Seattle's offense is just, they're a little too inconsistent. We saw that in the Packers game. I mean, the Packers defense is not exceptional by any stretch. They do force a lot of turnovers. They're not a great defense. They held that offense scoreless for 57-plus minutes. Took the punter, John Ryan, throwing a flip touchdown pass in order to do it. I was thinking the Patriots are now going to end a 10-year title drought. That's going to be the cap. Everyone can stop talking about how they haven't won one since Spygate. Well, what are people going to think now? Now everyone's going to look at all the titles. If you want to. I tend to think Bill Belichick is a great coach without this stuff. Tom Brady's a great quarterback without this stuff. But in some people's minds, they're always going to look at all of it as tainted.
Oh, no question about it. And you know what I'm fascinated by locally? You know, I covered the Wild a lot last spring because they were good and they were in the playoffs and were interesting down the stretch. I've been around them a lot this year. I am fascinated by the fact that any gambling allegation drives people crazy about the NFL. Any gambling allegation drives people even crazier in baseball. You know, there have been point-shaving scandals in basketball that have blown up programs. And yet,
including a couple at my alma mater.
Yeah. And then you have Thomas Vanek flipping over his paycheck, signing it over to gamblers to pay massive gambling debts, and nobody gives a damn.
Isn't that just indicative of the fact that the NHL, at its core, the general populace doesn't care about? I've gotten in trouble before for saying that nobody cares about hockey, but relatively speaking, if you take, not in Minnesota, I'm talking about nationwide. I'm talking about what people are going to put on SportsCenter, what is going to land on the front page of USA Today, not what matters right here. Yes, in O'Gara's, is it a game night tonight? It might be a game night.
There's college games tonight.
Okay, I actually can't remember if an NHL team still exists here in Minneapolis, St. Paul. But
send your hate mail.
At any rate, I think that it has a lot to do with the fact that you just don't have the same level of outrage. I mean, imagine if they stopped NFL games and let two guys fight in the middle of it. The NFL has a huge problem with being sued for, I mean, there's a $900 million concussion lawsuit settlement out there. But if you stop the game and have people fight, I don't think that would continue to happen. I think someone would step in. But with the NHL, you have these brief moments of Derek Boogaard dying, you know, after years of painkiller abuse, and saying, "Boy, isn't that terrible?" Well, let's go back to fighting. Let's get back to hockey now. Let's get back to the fighting. You wouldn't have if the same thing happened on an NFL field. It just would be far different. And a big part of that is it's the attention. It's the Adrian Peterson effect. As much as I can sit here as a journalist, somebody who has dealt with Adrian Peterson, and as a father and say, I would never do that to my child. I don't agree with that form of punishment. Adrian Peterson is not judged the same way if Ray Rice doesn't happen. If that's not all in the same week, if the tape doesn't come out, frankly, he might not be indicted there based on the way that I've heard the process played out.
Right.
In terms of the initial indications they were going to no-bill him, then 3 days later, grand jury takes up the case again, decides to bill him on a felony charge. It's judged totally differently. Everything is contextual, but in the NFL, and you look at everything they went through in September and October, straight up until last month when they approved the personal conduct policy between Peterson, Rice, and Greg Hardy, it's the fact that everything can seem to be microwaved, and you have the Twitter uproar, you have the social media uproar, you have all this stuff. It becomes the biggest thing in the world where, short of two NHL players killing each other at once, I'm not sure that SportsCenter would even know that it happened.
You're right. And I find hockey fascinating, especially in this town, because it's a smaller audience than the other major sports. And as you said, get away from Minnesota, in a lot of markets, it's really kind of a minor sport. And yet the people who care about hockey care about everything. They care about how sharp Zach Parisi's left skate is. And like, I do a podcast with Michael Russo, the great hockey writer, and I get listens and I get reaction to the other podcasts. But if I put out on Twitter, "Hey, you got any questions for Russo?"
Well, Russo's kind of a big deal.
He is a big deal, but it's remarkable not only the number of people who are wrapped Russoholics, but the in-depth nature.
Wrapped Russoholics. I like that.
I just made that up. That might be the name of our new podcast with Russo. But the depth of the questions. These people who love hockey, they want to spend all day playing hockey. They want to spend all night watching hockey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has a very, I would still call it a niche sport, but that niche is very intense. You're right. There's a reason that a bunch of NHL teams can sell it every single night. There's also a reason that hockey, by and large, in places like Phoenix, has struggled. I think it's not something that you can sail on a mass scale. I will say this. I don't know if there's anything more compelling than NHL playoff hockey.
I agree.
When you get into a 7-game series, I watched every second of the Wild and Blackhawks or Wild Avalanche series last year because every minute matters. You sometimes get the feeling, I think, game 47 in an 82-game schedule, that maybe this is not the biggest game these guys have played. Now, hockey is unique in this. You have to go hard. It's really difficult to half-ass it in hockey. NBA, baseball.
Can I give you Thomas Vanek's number and you can have that conversation with him?
Well, let's go ahead and say, by and large, if you don't want to get killed and if you don't want to make an ass of yourself, you better go hard out there. Whereas basketball, baseball, you can be hungover. You can be, let's just think of some no-hitters. Hungover, drunk, high on crack cocaine. There's a lot of things that you can do, and it's probably not going to impact you too much.
Podcasts when you're completely obliterated.
You okay?
I don't know.
I'm just double-checking.
I'm not aware.
How about this comparison? And this one popped into my head. Deflating footballs, compare that to either too much pine tar on the bat or too big of a knob on the goalie's stick.
I would say, the pine tar thing was kind of the reverse of this. I really do think Belichick or Brady or somebody, one of their underlings, found a way to give them underinflated balls to use. However they did it, however they accomplished it, whoever did it, whoever is going to end up getting blamed for it, I do think this was a calculated thing. The pine tar thing was one of baseball's many just stupid rules that have stayed on the books. It's like those rules in Wyoming that you can't tie your horse up after 8 o'clock at night. It's just one of those stupid rules that stayed on and Billy Martin was smart enough to call it into play at exactly the right moment. It was a moment of genius. But having the pine tar farther up the bat doesn't help you. It just looks stupid. It doesn't help you at all. The knob too big on a goalie's stick, well, maybe that can help you a little bit, but that really is a matter of just happenstance, whether you happen to have the knob. This one, even if it's a stupid rule, I really do think the Patriots found a way to either legally or illegally give their team an advantage.
Right, and we, at this point, don't actually know.
No.
I really did go through and watch frame by frame, beginning of the first half, beginning of the second half, trying to figure out where people are. They've hired the NFL, if you saw the statement today, they've hired an investigative firm that specializes in forensic examination of emails and calls. They've hired Ted Wells again, the attorney who led the Bullygate investigation. I also think, as a media, we missed a golden opportunity to end the gates here. There's a lot of things that rhyme with deflate and deflation. Is there nothing else? The deflation innovation, the deflation creation. We can't come up with anything. We got to go back to gate.
Man. Deflatriots.
I like deflatriots.
Yeah, that's why I'm going.
Yeah, it's the gate thing. At some point, it has to end. We can't just keep tacking it on. It doesn't work.
No, it's a cliche.
That's how unoriginal as a whole we are.
Yes. All right, let's get to actual football now. Are you going to the Super Bowl?
I will be there, heading down this Sunday.
I'm heading down Wednesday.
I am going to the Pro Bowl. I actually might play quarterback in the Pro Bowl if my tabulation of the votes are correct.
Better you than Andy Dalton. That's another fascinating. The Pro Bowl itself I don't care about at all, but the Pro Bowl as an institution fascinates me because Anybody with any sense looks at it and says, how ridiculous. You're basically playing a contact sport in a non-contact format with players who either didn't want to go or players, the best players are staying out of it or playing thinking, I just don't want to get hurt. Everybody knows it's a joke, and yet it'll get a great TV rating.
What's the thing? It'll get a better rating than the World Series.
Yeah, absolutely.
And your average Week 7 Bucks-Titans game will get a higher rating than the Stanley Cup.
Absolutely. And I don't know what that says about a society, but it does tell you that to me, the NFL has reached a point where anything that happens will only increase, if not the popularity, the attention it gets, which is all they really care about. They want eyeballs on TVs.
It's like the entire idea of oversaturation.
Right.
And I've talked about this with one of their heads of their media division because they've rolled out all sorts of stuff. They got that NFL Now app where you can track your players. You can go through archive video, all the NFL films, all the old games. You can pay in to different levels if you want more of that stuff. And I was asking him about the possibility of what if you start playing more nights a week? You've already taken over Thursdays. You've played 2 Saturday games this year. You obviously are all-day Sunday and Monday. And it was, logistically, it's not possible. He said in the same breath, we don't want to oversaturate, but logistically it's not possible. If you could, let's be honest about this.
If they could,
you
they
could
would.
play Tuesdays and Wednesdays, you would, but they find other ways to do it. What happened yesterday when it's announced that all 3 London games next year will be at 8:30 a.m. Eastern? People cheered.
Absolutely.
Quadruple headers, 3 weeks. Why not do it all 17?
Absolutely.
We can't get enough.
No, it's amazing. And I love it when as an NFL writer or as a columnist, I'm on the West Coast and I get to wake up and watch the first NFL game at like 10 o'clock while I'm eating breakfast. I love it. So, So, of course, and I love the idea of them playing in London and having a game on in the morning. I love it.
I woke up at 7 a.m. or whatever that was when the Lions played the early game, the Lions-Falcons game where the Falcons choked away like a 20-0 halftime lead. And I was got up to go to the gym. I was covering a Cardinals game at like 2 o'clock. I get up and go to the gym. I'm like, there's football on already.
It's awesome.
It's
absolutely awesome.
Football over breakfast.
And the funny thing is that college football doesn't work like that at all. And college football has, in many ways, a great product. It's the pageantry, the tradition, the rivalries, the way that those programs are just tied into their localities. It's all great. But if you tell me there are 40 college football games on this week, I'm going to go, I'll watch 1.5. And if you tell me that there are 16 NFL games on and they're all being played consecutively, I'm like, okay, how do I rearrange my sleep schedule so I can see all of them?
Right, because you're watching Thursday.
Yep.
You're watching probably 3 games on Sunday.
I am.
And you're watching Monday.
Absolutely.
So you're watching 1/3 of the games in the entire league on a weekly basis, higher than that in the weeks where you've got buys. I think the difference with college football is just that you can have, there's more meaningful games because but the second half of the season, how many of the games are you lose and you're eliminated from something, whether it's the conference title chase, whether it's the national title chase to get into the championship, however many teams that ends up being next year. And you can have more good games in one day. I don't watch a great deal of college football simply because Saturday's like my one day to sort of reboot because everyone's paying attention to that. Or travel. Or do work in advance for Sunday. Yeah. But there are days where I'll look at the schedule and it'll be, holy crap, there's 7 different games of like 2 top 25 teams all playing each other. When the SEC this year had Ole Miss and Mississippi State, all of which, of course, fell off at the end of the year. But when you had all the top 10 teams and they're all playing each other consecutively, it can be tough to pull yourself away from that. I get it.
Now, you're a Minneapolis guy, or where did you, Edina?
Edina is where I went to high school.
Okay, where'd you grow up?
Mostly in Edina.
Okay.
Moved from, I believe I moved from Anoka to Andover to Edina.
Okay. So what made you want to do what you're doing now? When did the lightning bolt hit you, or when did you make the stupid decision to go into journalism?
Well, honestly, and I was actually telling somebody this earlier today, we used to subscribe to the Star Tribune. I specifically remember having like a fit one time with my parents because they canceled the subscription. I was like, we have to get it because I would read it every day. And I would read, you were probably on the Twins beat at that point.
Probably.
I remember reading.
Although I came here to cover the Vikings in like 1990. So I came here to be an NFL writer.
And I'm thinking middle school, high school. So this is mid to late 90s.
I was mostly on the Twins beat and
Right, so reading Dan Barrero at the time, reading Patrick Royce, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be the voice of Minnesota sports, so to speak. I thought that was just so cool that you could do that. Now, of course, like anyone, then you go through high school, you go through college, you get out of college, and you realize, I have no idea how to be that guy. And so that's where then I had to go. And, yeah, my first job coming out of college, hopefully Chad Abbott's not listening, but he was paying me $8 an hour, 20 hours a week.
That much?
Yeah.
Interesting.
$160 a week.
There are a lot of K-Fan employees going to be pissed off that he's paying somebody that much.
That was my job, $8 an hour, 20 hours a week, and writing about the Vikings in 2003 and covering the Mike Tice era Vikings with Randy Moss and Dante Culpepper and the inevitable 6-0 start followed by a 3-10 or 3-7 finish. And I mean, it was a formative time. Then went to Wisconsin, worked at a small paper in Eau Claire for 22 months or so, the Leader Telegram, covering Northwoods League baseball and high school sports, D3 college sports. Went to Green Bay, covered the Packers for the Green Bay Press-Gazette for 3 years, and then came back to 1500 ESPN in like 2010.
It's funny. My first real job in the business was being an agate clerk, which is just typing in all the tiny little statistics.
I've done that too.
For $6 an hour. It was 40 hours a week, no benefits, and if I wanted to write, I did it in my free time.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're young, you just get your foot in the door wherever you can.
And in hindsight, when I worked in Eau Claire, and at that paper, I went from sports reporter to assistant sports editor to sports editor in about a 10-month span, because that's a mill where people just are quitting, they're disappearing off the face of the earth, and all of a sudden, you're running the department. In hindsight, I probably would have had a little better perspective and treated some of the part-timers better, because they are. I mean, we'd take on crazy things. You probably remember doing this. If you took Friday Night Football scores.
Yeah.
We were at the time, and this already dates me, this wasn't even that long ago, 10 years ago, but we were a PM paper during the week.
Weird.
So Monday through Friday, our deadlines were like 10 a.m. So all the copy would be in at night, paper would be laid out at night, then it would be turned over to one of the managing editor, who of course would rip everything up, didn't like this, move this around, and then the guy on the mop shift. So you have the slot, the rim is the assistant to the slot,
yes,
and then the mop is the guy who comes in the morning at the PM paper and moves everything around to the real editor's liking. And so that's what you're used to. So that's a different sort of a schedule. You can sit there, you can goof off till 2 a.m. Friday and Saturday night when you're putting out the morning paper on those days, and those are, especially Friday, is the huge high school football night, and everything's ending. All the games are ending at 9:30 p.m., and now we're trying to cover 70 high schools throughout northwest Wisconsin. So you've got 8 part-timers out there. We're taking phone calls, trying to lay out the paper, working to get the photos in. I just remember those times and just completely losing my mind, because you'd have part-timers come in or send over a box score, and it's got no first names, or it's got completely incomplete statistics. And if in hindsight, you're looking back at it going, I probably didn't have to blow a gasket because we didn't have Cameron's offensive statistics where 7 people in Cameron, Wisconsin get this paper. But, you try to do your best. You try to take some level of pride in it. I can remember dressing down some of those guys, and I do feel bad about that looking back.
I covered high school sports in Dallas. We tried to cover the entire region, high school football. And, there are days where I have to drive to a high school to tell the coach, we really do need somebody to call in their stuff on Friday nights, or and just beg them. Because, that was the only outlet. You couldn't cover all the games with stringers. It's amazing some of the stuff you do when you're young. Roos and I were telling stories about this the other day. I remember covering high school games in Texas, where you drive there, you talk your way into the gate because they don't understand press passes or anything like that.
Right.
You go up to the press box, which is already occupied by fans and parents and everything else, and you basically bribe your way into a place to sit. You cover the game, you rush down, you grab people coming off the field who don't know that you're going to be there or expect you. You go back up to the press box, you start writing on deadline. They shut out all the lights in the stadium. You have to stop writing halfway through your article, climb over the barbed wire fence, get to your car, and this is the older days where we didn't have Wi-Fi, drive to a 7-Eleven and finish writing on your little Trash 80 Radio Shack, where if you type fast, it takes like half an hour for the words to catch up, and then you realize you screwed up and you got to erase them all. Just unfucking believable stuff you did. Then you got to hold up the couplers to the phone, the actual pay phone, and hope that they glommed on there well enough that the story would make it in before deadline. That was how you covered a game in high school football back then.
Well, even me, 10 years ago, you didn't have Wi-Fi in every coffee shop or in McDonald's or anything like that. So we had like a couple of devices. You had to borrow a laptop. If you were going to cover something way far away like Wausau, you had to borrow a laptop, borrow one of like the 2 cards we had, the like uplink cards, and pray that you got a signal. That's as far back as I go. But even that, looking back upon it, or hey, 2 cards are gone. You're covering a game 45 minutes away. You got to drive back to the office and write it because hey, we're a PM paper. We got all the time in the world. I one time crashed my car. I was coming back from covering a Chippewa Falls girls basketball game. Chippewa Falls, where they make Leinenkugels, just north of Eau Claire. And you got to come down. This was old Highway 53. No, it was on the new Highway 53, but it was only partly open. So I'm driving my Ford Explorer down Highway 53, probably going too fast. It's snowing. And they were still doing construction, so there's cones blocking it off. You can't go straight. You had to exit. So I hit the brakes. Car just starts swerving all over the place, back end going out. I go, and there's bluffs on either side. If you've ever been through that part, now you can drive on 53 up through Eau Claire, but there's like huge bluffs where they had to take dynamite and blow it out. So I'm swerving. I'm going, well, I'm going into the mountain. So I go down into the ditch, fly up. I'm like just hammering on the brakes, hoping I don't hit it full speed. Hit it at maybe 20 miles an hour. Totally smashed in one corner of the car, like fully up. Sitting there, I'm fine. No airbag deployed because I hit it sideways because I'm an idiot and didn't just go in straight and try to save myself. I was trying to save the car. Cop rolls up and is like, can you move it? Well, to my surprise, I could. So I drive my car back to the office. The whole body has shifted at about a 30-degree angle. So I'm looking off to the side over my left shoulder, driving the thing back into the office. You know, it's like the rims on the car are rolling over like it's got square wheels, like it's the Flintstones or something. I roll into the office. The other guys I work with come out and are laughing hysterically at me. I'm furious because I bought the car used like 3 months before. It's ruined. I'm calling the insurance company. Finally, it's probably 12:30, 1 in the morning. And one of the editors just goes, is he going to write that story? Yes, I will write the story. Stayed there till 3 in the morning. Got the thing done.
That reminds me of a Dallas Morning News. By the way, the bad driver who's speaking, that's Tom Pelissero, USA Today. I'm Jim Souhan. This is SOUHAN-UNFILTERED.com. We are at O'Gara's Bar and Grill off Snelling in 94. Come on by. And there's, by the way, live karaoke tonight starting at what, 9, Evan? 9:30 in the what they're calling the shanty now. It used to be called the garage, which is just a blast. We need to get Tom Pelissero up there for live band karaoke. You used to play in a band, right? I remember that from your wedding.
Way back at Boston
It looked
College.
like a punk band.
It was punk rock, yep.
Cool.
Yeah. Played a lot of covers and stuff. We played around in Boston, played the Middle East, played basically all the Irish bars that are around in the
awesome.
the Alston Brighton area. Yeah, those were fun times.
When's the last time you played a guitar?
I played a guitar relatively recently,
Okay.
not nearly as much as I used to at this point. But, yeah, I haven't performed live since Copperfield's May 17th, 2003. That was the final show.
Wow, how about that?
We covered Boys to Men's So Hard to Say Goodbye to Yesterday's.
You're kidding me.
Oh, it was a fantastic version.
give
The
me a
ladies in the
description.
audience were just in tears 2 days before graduation. Everyone losing it, hugging each other, saying their goodbyes. It was great.
I played with my old band at O'Gara's a few times, and I got a new band. We're going to try to get them up and running so we can kind of play before live band karaoke at this bar.
When do I get to make my guest spot?
Basically, whenever you want.
All right.
Yeah,
You let me know.
We'll take you on.
And just make sure it doesn't have more than 3 chords.
We kind of like
A lot of practice.
We like the DAG pattern. We really play a lot of songs with DAG. Just depend, and the real variable is how much distortion.
Sure, I'll take that, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll bring 5 pedals. I won't actually know how to use them. I'll just keep hitting them.
Keep stomping on
generate
them.
different tones.
Absolutely. The Seahawks fascinate me. The Patriots fascinate me for all the reasons we already talked about. I thought it was really a lot of fun to cover the Seahawks at last year's Super Bowl because you got Pete Carroll paying homage to Bud Grant. You have Darrell Bevell, who might be the most accomplished coordinator who isn't going to get a head coaching job. You have the Percy Harvin, there or gone factor. You have the Russell Wilson, former Wisconsin quarterback, who I just love watching him play. And then you got all the trash talkers on defense. I love covering that team. What's your experience been around them?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's a really salty group. I mean, from between Richard Sherman, Doug Baldwin, who has had some choice words to say about me before. Straight through, I mean, a lot of the team, as much as Russell Wilson is, on play, it's just, it's robotic, and it's the same, hey, it's 100 yards, 53 and a third, and we're just going out there doing our best, that whole thing, go Hawks. The other guys are liable to say anything at any moment, and there's a lot of just kind of, angry guys. So you put Percy in there. I talked to one person who witnessed so there was the incident with Golden Tate last year where Tate had a black eye before the Super Bowl. Then this year in camp, Percy got into it with Baldwin, which is two guys who I would pretty much assume probably would get into it eventually. Even with Tate, as one person described it to me, he was mouthing off through all the press conferences all the Super Bowl week last year about how, hey, we did it without Percy all year. Like, why wouldn't we be able to do it now? So eventually they had to have it out. With Baldwin, it was everyone sitting in the locker room. All of a sudden, here come Baldwin and Harvin, like, jammed up on one another, grabbing each other. They go crashing into a ping pong table, and it took 3 of the offensive linemen to pry them apart because they're going after each other like that. It's a different sort of a group. It's a lot of guys who, the chip on their shoulder thing gets overplayed to a degree, but it really is just sort of this anger and this. They want to believe now that still everyone's doubting them. Nobody's doubting him. Baldwin comes in there and starts saying, how many of you mother bleepers didn't believe in us? And Charles Robinson, the Yahoo writer, at the end of the rant goes, hey, weren't you guys favored to come back from 16 down? But that's
so true.
They sort of sell themselves on this whole thing that we're the people that everyone always doubted. If you win a second Super Bowl in a row, which they'd be only, the 8th team in the NFL history to pull that off, I don't know how much you can play that card any more than you could play it after the last one. And then you're right, you've got Darrell Bevel in there, who's one of the nicest guys you're going to meet in the league. He's soft-spoken. He's over there at the NFC Championship game last week posing for photos with the quarterback coach. His nickname's Tater. I can never remember his full name.
Let's just call him Tater then.
Tater, Russell, and T-Jack is there too. Tavares. It's the 4 of them. Tavares won the coin toss.
He
He's
did.
getting shouts out the entire week. They're over there posing with the NFC Championship
Chili saw that in
trophy.
him, by the way. Chili knew Tavares is going to win a big coin flip someday.
Without a doubt. Yeah. They haven't had to actually put him on the field. Think about that. Tavares Jackson's always one snap away from playing in the Super Bowl. He played last year because they were kicking the crap so bad out of the Broncos. But Bev's over there posing for photos, and then he's barefoot. He's wearing, shorts and a T-shirt. He goes running off after him like, Bev, and, said hi and talked to him for a little bit. And, he's just like, this is just so cool. It's so hard to do. It's so hard to get to this point, much less do it twice. And if you think about it, this is where Bevel doesn't get nearly enough credit, because Seahawks fans rail against him all the time about how inconsistent their offense is. They got a lot of reasons the offense is inconsistent. One of them being when a team plays a lot of man coverage like the Packers did, those receivers can't always consistently shake it. And if Wilson is struggling to throw from the pocket, it's a bad combination. You're relying a lot on Marshawn Lynch. But think back to 2012. Bevel goes into camp thinking, Matt Flynn's going to be my quarterback. Flynn's terrible. Russell Wilson plays great. Wilson's your quarterback. Two guys who are pretty far apart on the physical ability spectrum.
Oh, yeah.
Flynn's just kind of like a smart guy, right attitude, tries hard, can go through the offense.
Pocket passer.
And without the arm to actually be able to do it.
Passer,
now you go to Russell Wilson, so you had to make the transition in 2012. And if you watch it, I went back and watched 4 of their games that year. No zone read in week 2. Little bit by week 7 or week 8. Then by the Falcons game, they're running it every other snap. They're running a whole series with that. 2013, he comes in. Percy Harvin is now going to be there. All those things, all the ways you can manufacture touches for Percy, which you'd already done in Minnesota. Percy gets hurt in camp, doesn't get hurt in camp. Decides he's hurt in camp.
Yes.
Has hip surgery, misses almost the entire year. So you got to change over the offense. 2014, week 1, Packers, who's the star? It's Percy. They're running jet sweep all day. He's changing the field. He's stretching it horizontally. You got Marshawn running downhill. You're thinking, this is the thing that's going to balance everything out. Week 6, they're sick of Percy. They trade him away. And again, you got to reboot that offense. 3 years in a row, they've had to reboot it. Tom Cable, the former Raiders coach, has a heavy hand in that room in terms of how much he weighs in the run game. He's really respected, strong voice. Bev's the one, though, calling those plays. Play-caller-quarterback relationship might be the most important in all of professional sports. 3 years in a row, Bev's had to re-gear that offense, and he's got them pretty far in the playoffs every year.
I hate to admit it, but you just kind of previewed my column I'm doing next week on Bevel, because everything you said is exactly why I give him credit. I think he's done a great job. I don't know if he has the personality to be a head coach or not, but at some point, somebody's going to have to give him a shot.
You'd think so. I mean, look at the guys who have gotten head coaching jobs out of Seattle. You've got Gus Bradley 2 years ago, defensive coordinator, replaced by Dan Quinn, who now all indications are Dan Quinn's going to end up the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. Yep. Well, what's Pete Carroll's background? He's a defensive coordinator. Everything he's always done has been defense. So you look at those guys, not to say that either of them are not smart and they both project like head coaches. You meet them and you go, that guy's an NFL head coach. Yeah. But when you got Pete there, he gets the reputation for being just a rah-rah guy, a great motivator, and he is. But he's a smart X's and O's guy, too. He doesn't call the plays, doesn't wear the headset. But he's pretty smart in terms of football. You don't have that on the offensive side of it yet. Bevel got maybe one interview this year. I think he interviewed with the Raiders. He might have been interviewed by Buffalo. Tom Cable got one interview this year with the Jets. Those guys at some point you would think are going to get jobs, but Bevel is a different personality, and a lot like Todd Bowles, who got the Jets job after 20-plus years as an assistant. You meet Todd Bowles, you don't say head coach.
Right.
He's another guy who's kind of soft-spoken, very smart guy, unbelievable strategist, but not somebody who you'd think he has that personality. And in the end, you know how NFL owners are. They want to be sold on something. They got to be sold on this guy's the face of my franchise. And with Bevel, you got to fall in love with the guy.
Yes, absolutely. And I have.
What's that?
I have, for the record.
Well, that's good.
I miss Bev. I miss having Bev around. All right, we're going to go to the segment of the show we call Broadcast News now, hit you with some different kinds of questions, then we'll wrap up with a brief Viking talk. Favorite TV show?
All time, I mean, probably remains Seinfeld. That's a cliched answer, but that has to be up there.
Can...
All-time drama, Breaking Bad.
Oh, I'm rewatching it again right now.
Really?
It's amazing.
It is good going through it the second time.
It is, because especially if you do what I did, is I watched it just, like any other viewer the first time through, and then I read a lot about it, and now I'm watching it again, and you see, to me, all the great TV shows, the great music, the great movies, great writing, always works on different levels.
Right.
There is the function, there's the architectural, functional, here's how it has to work, and you have to do it efficiently level, and then there's the other layers that really add on, and there's so much symbolism, there's so much foreshadowing, there's so many things where you see a scene and you look back and go, oh, okay, and like one of the things I didn't really notice the first time is that Walt tends to take on the characteristic, at least one characteristic of everybody he kills. And one example is, you remember the guy in the basement who wants the...
Wait, now are we assuming everyone listening has seen it? If not, turn it off, fast forward about 2 minutes on the podcast.
I actually don't think this will be a spoiler.
Okay.
Or much of a spoiler. Remember,
so he kills the guy in the basement.
I didn't say... Well, yeah, okay, he kills the guy in the basement. But he cuts... the guy wanted his crust cut off of his sandwich, right?
Yep.
Later, and it's not immediately, but later in the show, you see Walt, who never before has done it, even making sandwiches, all of a sudden is cutting the crusts off his sandwich to eat them himself.
It's very smart.
There's a lot of stuff like that.
I would have put True Detective into that category. That is the most compelling single viewing experience I've ever had, up until the final episode, which I thought was terrible. And was mailed in. I thought it needed 5 more episodes to wrap it up.
That's really funny, because that was exactly my reaction. Is I loved the series. I thought the last one, it felt, you know what it felt like? It felt like Silence of the Lambs played out outside instead of inside. You know?
Well, you had, because it was only, an 8-episode run, I think. It was a shorter, so 8 or 9. Most TV series are 13. Right. They needed those extra 4, 5, 6 episodes to actually be able, you can't introduce that many themes and not tie up any of the loose ends. I agree completely. Favorite movie? I would say still, to this day, Swingers is my favorite movie. I love the freaking answers I get to these questions. It's amazing the stuff people come up with. Roy Smalley, his hair is always perfect, always dressed in a beautiful suit, just very aware of his appearances. Hair's fake, right? Actually, it's real. I've touched it. Don't tell him I've touched it. He didn't notice. His favorite movie, Big Lebowski. And when we talk about music, also great hair in that movie. Yeah, absolutely. And when we talk about music, he loves 60s, he loves 70s, he loves hair bands, he loves Inagata Vita. It's great, cool. Terry Ryan was telling me how much he loves Eminem and U2. Wow. It's amazing, yeah. Okay, favorite music, song, album, whatever, genre, just give me something. I mean, that fluctuates. I've always been a punk rock fan, so wide range. I mean, you name it across all. I mean, from The Descendants straight through to Blink-182. That entire
How about social distortion?
Spectrum. Social distortion.
Yeah, we play a few social distortion
Absolutely.
songs in our band.
Unwritten Law.
Yep.
And then, I mean, more recently, I mean, there's a lot of great bands that people probably are not as familiar with. Cloud Nothings, The Hotelier, a local band. I'll give them a shout-out to a local band, Charlie Siren, a local punk rock band that is fantastic, and I've listened to their latest album like 50 times.
Have to check them out.
Yeah,
that's
very
awesome.
good.
Answer this question. I was wrong about. And
Me personally,
yes.
you were wrong. You've been wrong about a lot
exactly,
of stuff.
but
I don't think we got
don't
enough
have
time.
enough
You gave
time.
a 5-minute
so
signal there.
But with you, I think we might be able to do it in the next 20 minutes or so.
I was wrong about. I mean, I've been wrong about plenty of stuff too.
Everybody is. Anybody who ever expresses an opinion on anything is going to be wrong a certain amount of times.
I was wrong about Christian Ponder. I would take that one because, and part of this was just talking to people in the league. It was he could function at a high enough level, and I think more than anything, I thought that he had the right personality for the position. Whereas I think what happened was you got into the tougher situations, you got into positions where he had to do more for the team. And frankly, in the 2013 season, he just completely melted down.
He did.
You know, from a mental perspective, you just looked at the way that his footwork went, all those strides you saw him take at the end of the 2012 season, which I think a lot of people, you had to look at the Texans game and the finale against the Packers, which was the best game he ever played, maybe the best game he ever will play. You looked at it and you said, all right, there's something here.
Yep.
In a run-first offense, this guy can run the bootlegs. He can make the the short to intermediate passes. Never going to be a great deep ball thrower, but he can play. And it didn't work out.
Give me a Super Bowl prediction, not the score. Any idiot can predict the score. Predict something that's going to happen in the next, whatever it is, 8-9 days. Just give me a prediction on something unusual happening. Either
extraordinarily
in the game or the league.
overinflated balls. How about that?
Beach balls. I love it.
I think that the Patriots are going to have more offensive success than you would think going into it. I think that Belichick, even though he's not, he doesn't have an offensive background, but he still plays such a heavy hand in everything that they do, everything that they touch, which is part of the reason that if anyone was deflating footballs, it will come back to Belichick, and it will. He has enough knowledge of what's going on. That was what was so strange about the press conferences, wasn't it? Which is the coach who knows everything about his
pretending
team,
he's ignorant.
saying, I have no idea how the balls are prepared. Even if, you didn't know the balls were being deflated. You didn't know how balls are prepared before the game. That struck me as a little bit odd, but I think that guy is such a good strategist. I do think that team is going to come ready to play. I'm not going to say, it's now the chip on their shoulder, and they're going to the other gates in the background aside. They want to come out and they want to win a championship, and I think that the Seahawks may have a little bit more trouble than they think they're going to handling Rob Gronkowski. Nobody in the league yet has come up with it. Now, the Seahawks have Cam Chancellor, who's a big dude, a great athlete who can run. They've also got Earl Thomas, who, even though he's not nearly as big as Cam or Gronk, is also a pretty good player on that back end. I think they have guys who can match up with them. I don't think, though, that they can completely contain them.
And what's fascinating is if you look at weaknesses in the Seattle defense, it's running the ball up the middle, and now Blunt is playing very well for that team, and it's covering tight ends. The Seahawks shut down passing offenses by shutting down wide receivers. They have not shut down tight ends.
Well, and part of that's because they play their stuff.
Right.
They come out there and they play Sherman on the left.
Yep.
They're not going to move him around a whole lot. Byron Maxwell's played well on the other side. Jeremy Lane has had some positive turns, but they're going to play their defense, and they're not going to adjust for anybody. Having Chancellor in the box, that's going to help you against Blunt.
Right.
But they're playing Kevin Williams at nose tackle.
Yeah.
Kevin's he was a great dude talking to us for all those years. But he never. How many times did he say, "I never want to play nose tackle"? And now look at it; he's going to be playing nose in the Super Bowl.
Final thought: Tom Pelissero, USA Today football writer, local man about town. I appreciate the time. This hour has flown. Give me your take on Teddy Bridgewater.
I would hesitate to give too strong of a take just because I haven't gone back. It's not like the old days where I'd watch every single snap of the guy. I will say this. I mean, you saw bright moments you saw how he progressed at the end of the season.
Yep.
And I think when you think of all the adversity he had surrounding him, losing Adrian Peterson early on, not knowing he had to play. If it were up to the coaching staff, if it were up to Rick Spielman probably, no way that guy's even on the field in 2014.
Right.
He ends up coming in over down the stretch. You look at his completion percentage. You look at the fact that he did make some throws down the field. You'd say there's signs for encouragement, but I also have talked to people in the league who still doubt Teddy Bridgewater, a guy who Vikings traded up to draft him in the first round. There are probably some teams out there who wouldn't have taken him until the fourth. There's still doubt about whether or not over time his arm is going to get exposed. And I'm the first guy to say arm strength would not be in the top 5 characteristics I care about in a quarterback. But there are still people who think there are ways you're going to be able to expose what he's able to do in terms of the throws that he can make on the football field. So we'll see. It's certainly too soon to tell. My opinion on Christian Ponder after 2011 probably would be a lot different than my opinion on him now. It's tough to tell with Bridgewater, but he does seem to have that really low-key personality where you think he's soft-spoken. Does that translate? Everybody who's around him seems to love the guy.
They do.
And
they
he did
really
win
do.
a lot of football games.
It's not
He was pretty
BS.
efficient with the football back at Louisville.
Yeah, I'm on record. I think Bridgewater's going to be a top 10 NFL quarterback. I think he has enough arm strength. I also think, we all talk about the development, studying, and getting into understanding NFL offenses, defenses. Bridgewater will develop physically. He's a skinny kid right now. He will get bigger and stronger.
And by the way, Mike Zimmer does not get nearly enough credit for what he did with that defense. Look at the Bengals defense after he left. Now look at the Vikings defense and some of the people that he was playing with out there.
I agree with you. I think Zimmer did a great job. I think Zimmer and Bridgewater have a chance to be really, really good together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think Zimmer has, the right mentality overall for building the program. And one more year at TCF. And then they're heading into the big stadium. This thing has to be trending the right way for Ziggy and Mark, and certainly I think that they've got some good pieces on that coaching staff to make it happen.
Tom, I appreciate this, man. It was a blast. That's Tom Pelissero, USA Today. Read his stuff at usatoday.com or buy the stinking paper. We'll accept that, too. I'm Jim Souhan. This is Souhan Unfiltered at SouhanUnfiltered.com. Thanks to Evan Davis. Thanks to O'Gara's for playing host again. Next podcast, 10 a.m. Sunday with Bob Sansevere. Next podcast after that, Dave St. Peter, Twins president, 5 p.m. at the local on Monday. Also give away a $50 gift card that one of my listeners won by retweeting the show link in the past. And I will be also doing some podcasts from Arizona during Super Bowl week. Again, thank you for listening. Find this and all the other podcasts at SouhanUnfiltered.com.